The Switch launch has been really, really interesting because all we've seen is just the same old tired arguments against the Switch carried over onto the Switch 2. You know, the people who religiously hated the Switch 1 have now, like, turned tail and started complaining about the Switch 2, even though these were the very same people insisting that a Switch Pro or a new console would fix all of Nintendo's problems. The reality of the situation is these people are never going to be happy no matter what Nintendo does. And you can see this a lot by seeing people complain about the Switch 2's launch lineup. Right? You have so many people coming out and saying that they don't need it, that it's not a very good platform, that it's unnecessary, and the reality is completely different, you know? Not only is Mario Kart World a banger, you know, by far one of the best games of the year, way better than Mario Kart 8, by the way. I've been seeing a lot of people say 8 is better. That is not the case. I can safely say that now. Not only do you have like Mario Kart 8, you have like a wide range of other titles that are available on the console, right? You have slop like Cyberpunk 2077 and Street Fighter 6, and you also have legitimately good games like Fantasy Life 2 and Hitman World of Assassins, right? You know, there's lots of good games on here, like new and old alike. And the giant mega Kamehameha cope from a lot of people is complaining about like how these games aren't exclusive, you know, conveniently ignoring the fact that there's virtually no such thing as exclusives on PlayStation, Xbox, or PC, but somehow this is like a huge, massive deal breaker for Nintendo fans who have never played games, the games that have been available on other consoles, right? So like Street Fighter 6, like, oh, I already played that, you know, even though, you know, someone like me like hasn't, you know. It's been a giant Kamehameha cope. Even though that something like Fantasy Life 2 came out on like May 21st, 2025, and has like a better version available on Switch, that somehow doesn't count as a good Switch 2 game. Even though, like, you know, my time spent playing it, it's probably my favorite game I picked up for the console, you know? And that's something that I did not have my eye on for a long while. You know, Hitman, you know, never played the series before. Like, I played through, like, the first couple of levels. Amazing game. I'm, like, completely in love with it. Like, my thing with the Switch 2 life cycle, right, you know, having played Mario Kart World, which in and of itself it's worth owning the console for, you know, people need 100% to stop complaining about ports. You know, like, talking about like third-party games and like trying to downplay them by saying that they've been available on other consoles already or aren't that good in the case of the ones that are launching day one, you know, games like Rune Factory and the like. You know, the reality is Switch 2 has had games right from the onset, right from the get-go, and the fans have been playing all of them, you know, in a wide range of different genres. And like the gaming community is doing everything it possibly can to downplay it and act as if these games are like somehow underwhelming or disappointing or like not that good. It's just laughably dumb. You know, Mario Kart by itself is like carrying the console launch. You know, we're talking about something that probably has like close to like 100% like attach rate, right? We seriously had that conversation on stream that like this game might be one of those things that like every Switch 2 owner owns, right? But, you know, the people who, the average person who owns like Mario Kart World is not going to have every single game that's available on the console, you know. So you're going to be seeing people pick up Hitman. You're going to see Hitman. You're going to see people pick up like Fantasy Life. You're going to see people pick up like Rune Factory. You're going to see people pick up like, you know, Street Fighter 6, you know. This has clearly been a very successful console launch with a wide range of games, and yet you have people like dismissing it for like very arbitrary, petty reasons, you know, like this idea that like, oh, that's available on Switch, the original Switch as well, so that doesn't count, even though the Switch 2 like noticeably upgrades like every Switch 1 game. You know, you have people complaining about like, you know, games coming from other consoles, and you have people like straight up ignoring brand new games, you know, like Fast Fusion and Rune Factory. You know, like it's always like this when it comes to Nintendo release schedules. You know, all of these people like refuse to acknowledge like everything but the absolute like cream of the crop biggest Nintendo games, but like it's bad this time, right? It's embarrassing because this console has clearly been like extremely successful right out of the gate, and yet you have like the general community just doing everything it possibly can to just downplay it and just like act like this is some like major disaster, like this is somehow like some huge like failure of a console. Like, you know, I just saw Grums like a couple of minutes ago, like, oh, I'm not picking up a Switch 2 because nothing on it interests me. And it really just dawned on me recently just how people like Grums, who have made their entire careers over like complaining about the current state of the gaming industry, how they can't admit what's right there in front of their face. You know, like the reality is, if you want to play good video games, you're only going to get it on Nintendo hardware. You know, Grums can cope and seethe all he wants about like PC gaming, but the reality is Nintendo is better. There is no disputing that at this point. But like, you know, the general average like 40-year-old grifter like cannot bring himself to admit it, you know, like, and this is like a reoccurring thing throughout like all these people. You know, I've seen Keemstar do it, I've seen Angry Joe do it, I've seen Darkside Phil do it. You know, it's a reoccurring thing with all these people who hate video games but still somehow find themselves in the gaming industry. You know, they are criticizing the Switch 2 while religiously reacting to every single like demonstration or showcase, you know, the PC gaming show, the Xbox One, the PlayStation One, while, you know, ignoring the highly successful, lucrative Switch launch. And this has very clearly blown up in their face to the point where, like, I'm seeing more and more people like call them out on it. You know, it's kind of crazy. Like, this console launch is really interesting because it's very similar to what happened with the Wii U, right? Where the Wii U had a spectacular launch, you know, filled with all these amazing games, you know, like Nintendo Land, New Super Mario Bros. U, like Zombie U, like all these like really cool, like innovative, like fun games, right? And like the industry like did everything it could to scream and cry and like refuse to acknowledge how good this stuff was, to the point where like the general public like never even realized that this console had like come out. Right, because this was before Nintendo Directs, before social media became mainstream, right? Like at that point, like Game Journos had gaslit people into thinking Nintendo was like a declining company on the verge of bankruptcy. You know, in spite of having like the most successful generation ever with the Wii and DS era, right? You know, the Wii U was kind of an anomaly in that sense, but now the gloves are off. You know, nobody listens to Game Journos, nobody respects them, and you know, Nintendo directly distributes information straight to their customers. Like, nobody is going to Keemstar for Nintendo coverage. You know, nobody cares what Angry Joe has to say about the new Zelda because he hasn't played any of them. You know, like, I saw Darkside Phil like doing this, like, oh man, like they don't have a new Donkey Kong at launch, and like that's coming out next month. So, like, what are you complaining about exactly? This entire, like, console launch cycle has just been filled to the brim with just giant Kamehameha copes. It's just been remarkable seeing like Game Journos do everything possible to try and deny reality that like this console is insanely successful right out of the gate. And I think this is going to be a repeat of what happened with the Switch, where they did much the same thing up until like Smash Ultimate came out, I would say, where they just refused to admit this thing was successful. After they admit it's successful, then they'll start like talking about how much they would like want Nintendo to like put out a new piece of hardware, you know, much like they did with the Switch Pro. But this has been like a really interesting situation because it really demonstrates just how ineffectual these tactics are in 2025. You know, all the complaints you see people like complaining about, like when it comes to Mario Kart World and the like, they're not going to stick. Like, none of them are going to stick. This game is clearly really popular and done really well, and there's absolutely nothing that the general gaming community can do to stop it.